Private space companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic might have been dominating the news around the space industry these days, but it doesn't mean the nation-state space agencies are out of the game yet. National space agencies like the USA's NASA, Russia's Roscosmos, and China's CNSA are old players in the same game, and they shouldn't be taken lightly. Chinese ambitions for space exploration are nothing to joke about. The China National Space Administration has proved its worth, even though it isn't as old as its US and Russian counterparts, from crewing their own space stations to sending robotic rovers to Mars. In fact, after the USA, China is the second country to soft land a fully operational spacecraft on Mars. China develops its rockets in-house. Now, there have been recent reports that China might be developing a rocket that is half a mile tall. Let us look at China's insane plan to build a half-a-mile tall rocket and how they are trying to beat SpaceX. The Chinese government has plans to build a 1-kilometer tall enormous rocket. This comes to about 0.6 miles high, and they want to construct this rocket in space. The Chinese government plans to assemble this mammoth of a rocket by sending the components piece by piece into orbit and assembling it there. This concept idea was laid out in a document released by China's National Natural Science Foundation of China to invite scientists and engineers to work on this project. The document, titled Guide for Major Projects of the Ministry of Mathematical Sciences, is looking for experts to make an ultra-large spacecraft about 1 kilometer in space. And the Chinese government is ready to spend 16 million yuan, which is about $2.3 million on the project. The project timeline is aimed to be about 5 years long. According to the official proposal, the project will be used as a major strategic aerospace asset. The Chinese government hopes to use this giant rocket to explore the cosmos for resources, unlock the mysteries of the universe, and provide a testing ground for long-term living in outer space. These are ambitious goals, even for a government-funded space agency. The assembling in space part makes sense, though. A rocket that size is too large to be launched in one piece from the Earth. Instead, flying the rocket in pieces to orbit and then assembling it in space is a feasible way to make a half-a-mile-long rocket. The engineers and researchers that come on board this project will be expected to find ways to minimize the weight of the components. This will lower the cost of the construction of such a large spacecraft, as well as make it easier to launch components into space. Since the less these modular parts weigh, the smaller number of launches that will be needed to get everything to space. The proposal laid out that the design of the spacecraft should be aware of the fact that this rocket will be assembled in space, so the ability to control the structure is of the utmost importance if they are to limit the altitude drift and deformation. The engineers will also have to keep in mind the vibrations during the assembly process. Any sound engineer can tell you unwanted vibrations can be the end of a machine before it even starts working. This rocket looks like China's answer to the human space exploration and colonization question, and we can't help but draw comparisons to SpaceX's Starship system. In essence, both the half-mile-long rocket by CNSA and the Starship by SpaceX are looking to solve the same problem: how do we get humans from one planet to another? But SpaceX and CNSA have very different ideas on how to do it. SpaceX isn't planning to make gigantic 0.6-mile-long rockets. On the contrary, SpaceX's whole strategy is to use a regular-sized rocket, that is, the Starship system. But instead of using one giant rocket, SpaceX plans to use hundreds of smaller ones for interplanetary transportation. SpaceX's plan is to get 1 million people on Mars by 2050. To get to this point, SpaceX wants to reach a critical mass point of 3 launches per day. SpaceX is planning to get their Starship manufacturing facility at Boca Chica running at full speed to build a fleet of 1,000 Starships over 10 years. This amounts to manufacturing 100 Starships every year. SpaceX plans to play the numbers game to get ahead, so it will be interesting to see how China intends to play the size game for their rocket. Ambitions of a half-mile-tall rocket sound amazing on paper, but will China really be able to pull something like this off? Now that is the real question. Let us look at the China National Space Administration or CNSA's track record to see how they have been doing so far. The CNSA was created in 1993 after the Chinese Ministry of Aerospace Industry was split into the CNSA and China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, or CASC. The former was to be responsible for policy, while the latter was to be responsible for the execution of China's space-related plans. One of the most notable accomplishments of the Chinese space program is their development of the Beidou Navigation Satellite System, or BDS for short. This is the equivalent of GPS navigation system developed by the USA, GLONASS by the Russians, Galileo positioning system by the Europeans. The Beidou consists of two separate satellite constellations. The Beidou consists of 35 satellites in orbit currently, and their application is both for the military as well as for commercial enterprises. The Chinese have also managed to launch a few deep space missions, and they're all controlled by the Xi'an Satellite Control Center. China also has massive ground stations in Jiangsu, Kashgar in China, and one ground station in Neuquén in Argentina. Currently, CNSA operates the Long March family of the rocket as their primary system for orbital launches. They are named after the historic Long March of the Chinese Army in 1934 and 1935 during the Chinese Civil War. Their Long March 5 has been their most active rocket for the past few years. The Long March 5 stands at a length of 57 meters and offers a payload capability of 25,000 kilograms for low Earth orbit and 14,000 for stationary geo-orbit. China is also developing the Long March 9, which will be a super-heavy carrier rocket. It is planned to have a maximum payload capacity of 140,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit, 50,000 kilograms to translunar injection, and 44,000 kilograms to Mars. In comparison, Starship plans to haul about 100,000 to 150,000 kilograms to Mars. China is also constructing its own separate space station called the Tiangong Space Station. The space station is being built in low Earth orbit, somewhere around 340 to 450 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Once completed, the Tiangong Space Station will weigh about 80 to 100 tons. This comes to be about one-fifth the mass of the International Space Station. And an interesting thing to note is that this is not China's first space station. China has previously maintained two space stations in orbit. The Tiangong-1 was active from September 2011 to April 2018. It was China's first prototype space station. It served as a crewed laboratory in space for China. The Tiangong-2 was launched in September 2016 and it lasted until July 2019, after which the station was deorbited. So suffice to say, China has experience building large space stations in space and has the expertise at maintaining them as well. The Chinese have shown that they are competent with their space program, but we will have to wait and see how their next plan to make a half-mile long rocket pans out. One question that is in everyone's mind after this video is what approach is better for space exploration, assembling and launching a few large rockets from orbit or launching a smaller but greater number of rockets from the Earth. Either way, humanity is slowly making progress toward being a true interplanetary species.